The storm found her before the wolves did. Rain hammered against the treetops and slid down in cold sheets, soaking Elena Harper from hair to bones. The forest had never felt this alive, never felt this angry. Branches whipped in the wind like the arms of restless spirits, and the ground shivered every time thunder cracked across the sky. Elena ran anyway. She didn't have the privilege of stopping. Not tonight. Not with the shadows on her trail. Her boots sank into wet soil, mud gripping at her ankles like desperate fingers trying to hold her down. Her breath came out in short, fractured bursts. Every inhale burned. Every exhale felt like it carried a piece of her life away. And still she pushed forward. Because behind her, somewhere deep in the storm, she could hear them. The shadow wolves. Not normal wolves. Not pack wolves. These things didn't breathe the way true wolves did. They didn't growl, they hissed. They didn't track her scent, they tracked her fear. And right now, fear was pouring off her skin like smoke. She ducked under a fallen branch, her shoulders scraping bark, sending a sharp sting through her arm. The forest floor was slick, littered with rocks and hidden roots. She stumbled. Her hand shot out to steady herself on a tree trunk, too late. Her foot slid, her body pitched forward, and she hit the ground hard. Pain shot up her wrist. Mud splattered her cheek. A thin cut opened along her palm, and that's when it happened. The faint glow. It pulsed beneath her skin, a soft silver light curling along her veins like wildfire learning how to crawl. She swallowed hard. Not now, she whispered, voice trembling, half plea, half warning. Her fingers curled into the mud to smother the glow, but it danced beneath her skin anyway, alive, insistent, wanting out. Thunder shook the earth, and in that instant the forest lit up in a jagged white flash of lightning. In the split second of brightness, Elena saw everything. The skeletal branches reaching overhead, the thick fog sitting low to the ground, the rising mist of her breath, and the shadows weaving between the trees behind her. 6 of them. No, 7. Dark, shifting shapes, their edges blurring into smoke. Eyes like burning coals. Bodies made of living storm. They had found her. Her pulse kicked into a sprint of its own. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the sting of the cut on her hand. Her legs trembled, but she ran anyway, pushing herself into the storm as if she could outrun fate itself. And through the chaos, through the pounding rain and snapping branches, she heard it. That voice in the back of her mind. The one she never asked for. The one she never trusted. I'm not ready. I can't let them see what I can do. She didn't know if the words were fear speaking, or truth. Maybe both. The wind whipped her wet hair against her cheeks. Fog clung to her skin like icy hands. Every tree seemed to lean closer, listening to her panic, whispering warnings she didn't understand. The forest felt alive tonight, too alive. As if it knew her secret. As if it feared what might happen if that silver flame inside her ever slipped free. A branch snapped behind her. Loud. Heavy. One of the shadow wolves lunged. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. She could feel its breath on the back of her neck, hot and wrong, like air that had never known oxygen. Elena shoved herself forward, sprinting so hard her vision blurred. Her lungs screamed. Her muscles begged. Her heart felt like it might break through her ribs. But she kept going. Because the truth was cruel. If she stopped, she wouldn't survive. If she lost control, she would destroy everything. And if anyone, saw that power inside her, she knew exactly what would happen. They would fear her. They would hunt her. They would call her cursed. Dangerous. Wrong. The same words she had run from her entire life. Lightning cracked again, painting the forest silver for a heartbeat. In that heartbeat, Elena saw the edge of the cliff ahead. She skidded, boots ripping through mud, momentum almost throwing her over the side. Her arms flailed. Her breath halted. The drop beneath her was steep, jagged rocks, foaming water, and a current strong enough to swallow her whole. The wolves hissed behind her. She turned slowly, the storm pushing against her back, her hair whipping forward across her face. Her chest rose and fell in frantic rhythm, each breath a battle. Her hand still glowed faintly, silver lines leaking through the cut in her palm, pulsing to the beat of her panic. The shadow wolves emerged from the fog, forming a half-circle around her. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. They simply watched, bodies shifting like smoke tangled with darkness. Elena swallowed. Her throat felt tight. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from that strange, building heat beneath her skin. The kind that whispered, "Let me out." She shook her head. No, she breathed. Not again. But the silver flame didn't care about her fear. It pushed against her veins, curling, rising, wanting to burst free and swallow the storm whole. Another hiss. Another step closer. Her heart thundered in her ears. The cliff pulled at her heels. The storm dug into her face. And something inside her, Something buried so deep she spent years pretending it didn't exist, began to rise like a sleeping beast waking from a long, angry dream. The ground shook under her feet. Her breath hitched. And then, a single arrow cut through the darkness. Thin, silent, deadly. It flew past her shoulder, and slammed into the earth with a sound that didn't belong to any weapon she had ever known. The ground cracked. Light burst from the impact. And for one fragile moment, the wolves froze. The forest fell silent. The storm paused. Even Elena went still. Because she knew that arrow. She had heard stories whispered in fear. Stories about the one man who could bend the storm to his will. The one man whose arrows could stop shadows as easily as they could stop hearts. The Alpha King. Her chest tightened. Her pulse stuttered. Somewhere in the darkness, a voice rose, deep, commanding, and impossibly calm despite the storm. Elena Harper. Her name. Spoken like a verdict. Spoken like a promise. She turned toward the voice, the forest bending around her as if making way. Lightning cracked again, and for a moment she saw a tall figure standing between the trees, broad-shouldered, cloak whipping in the wind, eyes glowing like molten amber. Dorian Blackthorn. The Alpha King himself. The wolves recoiled. Elena didn't breathe. The storm held its breath with her. And then, in a voice that felt like it pulled the night toward him, he said, "You're not dying tonight." Her heart flipped. Her knees almost buckled. Not because he had saved her, but because he had found her. Nobody was supposed to find her. Nobody was supposed to know her name. Yet here he was, standing in the storm like he had always known where she would run. Like he had been waiting. Dorian Blackthorn did not merely appear on the ridge. He arrived like a verdict. As if the storm itself had carved open a seam in the night just to let him step through. Rain hammered the leaves in sharp, angry slants, each drop catching on the hard lines of his jaw, tracing down the hollow of his throat. His presence bent the air. Even the lightning hesitated, flickering in stuttering flashes, as though unsure whether it wanted to expose or bow to him. Elena froze mid-step. The mud softened beneath her trembling boots, sucking gently at her heels like a warning. Don't go closer. Don't run either. Dorian stood above her, a silhouette forged from dominance and darkness. Broad shoulders, a cloak heavy with rain, hair slicked back from the storm. His eyes glowed that impossible amber, an ancient light pulsing beneath the surface. They weren't human eyes. They weren't safe eyes. But they were searching her. She didn't know why that made the fear worse. His voice followed a breath later, low and unmistakably certain. "Elena, I've been waiting for you." Her lungs pinched tight. She wanted to ask how he knew her name, how he found her, why he sounded like someone who had already walked through her memories. But her throat only scraped out air. No sound. Only the frantic quake of her pulse. Behind her, the shadow wolves closed in, snarls slicing through the fog. She felt their steps against the forest floor, the weight of their hunger like claws against her spine. Yet Dorian didn't move. He didn't descend the ridge. Didn't reach for her. Didn't lift a hand to signal protection. Instead, he watched her struggle. Watched her chest rise and fall in panic. Watched the tremor in her fingers. Watched the silver glow still pulsing faintly through her veins from the cut on her palm. Each flicker a betrayal of the power she didn't yet understand. "Elena," he said again, different this time, like he was testing how her name felt in his mouth. "Show me what you are." She backed up instinctively, boots slipping in wet soil. "Stay back," she whispered, voice thin and shaking. But Dorian didn't look offended. He looked intrigued. The shadow wolves lunged from the tree line. A flash of teeth. A burst of movement. A growl that rippled the ground. Elena gasped and spun, instinct screaming for survival. But in the heartbeat before they reached her, Dorian still did not interfere. He watched. Measured. Waited. Like a man who knew the ending of a story and wanted to see if the heroine figured out her part. Elena stumbled, hands shaking as she tried to summon something. Anything. She didn't know what she hoped for. Only that fear was burning too hot too fast, and if something didn't happen, her blood flared. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Literally, her veins lit with silver heat, a flash that illuminated the trees around her like a burst of moonfire. The wolves skidded, recoiling as the glow surged. Elena gasped, clutched her wrist, heart hammering wildly. "No, not again. I don't know how to," she cut herself off, breath catching in her throat. Dorian's voice broke through her spiraling panic. "Good." She jerked her head toward him. He had stepped forward now, slowly, deliberately, boots sinking into the mud without hesitation. His movements were controlled, predatory, yet not aimed to harm. The storm reflected in his eyes, and for a moment she felt as though he was studying the rhythm of her heartbeat rather than the danger around them. "You felt it," he said quietly, as if they were alone in a still room. "You let it answer you." "I didn't let anything happen," she snapped, fear sharpening her tone as she backed away from him. I can't control it. I never asked for power." He tilted his head, amber eyes narrowing. "Or for destiny?" Her breath caught again. The wolves shifted behind her, pacing, uncertain. They sniffed the air, picking up the scent of her fear, her blood, her strange shimmering magic. One growled low. Dorian stopped at the base of the ridge. Still not attacking. Still not protecting her. Just observing. "Elena," he murmured, "you told the forest you wanted to survive. Now show me if you meant it." The shadow wolf nearest her lunged. This time it was fast enough to hit. It crashed into her shoulder, sending her sprawling into the wet earth. Mud spattered her cheek, her ribs screaming as she rolled to the side. The wolf's claws sliced through her jacket, raking lines of fire across her skin. She cried out, reaching instinctively for something, anything, and that silver glow erupted again, but weaker this time, more like a flicker than a shield. The wolf snarled, sensing her fading strength. "Elena!" Dorian barked sharply. She looked up. Something in her recognized his voice not as authority, but as command. Something primal. Something that bypassed logic entirely. "Get up," he said softly, dangerously. "I need to see you stand." Another wolf lunged. Another burst of pain. Her breath hitched. Her forehead pressed into the mud. She was shaking, exhausted, terrified, her body cold with rain and raw fear. "Why won't you help me?" she choked, voice breaking. You can stop them. Why are you just standing there?" Dorian's jaw flexed. His eyes flickered, a storm behind a storm. And then he said the words that made the world tilt. "Because I need to know what you are before I choose to save you." Her heart stuttered. He stepped closer, slow enough to show restraint, close enough for her to feel the gravity of him. The wolves circled, but he barely spared them a glance. "You feel that power burning in your veins," he said in a low murmur, "and you're more afraid of yourself than of them." A wolf lunged again, this time going for her throat. Elena screamed, and the world exploded. Silver fire burst from her skin in a violent shockwave. The wolf flew backward, slamming into a tree with a yelp. The ground vibrated under her palms, and light crawled up her arms like living moonlight. She panted through the pain, eyes wide, fingers trembling with the force she could no longer deny. Dorian finally exhaled. Finally moved. The shift in him was small. Barely the turn of a shoulder, but the atmosphere changed instantly. The shadow wolves froze. Every single one. As though the storm itself held its breath. As though the forest understood that something ancient had stepped fully into its role. Dorian's aura snapped outward in a single overwhelming wave of alpha dominance. Thick, tangible, unavoidable. His amber eyes darkened to molten gold, and his voice rolled through the trees like thunder. "Enough." The wolves dropped, whimpering, chests pressed to the earth. Elena's knees buckled, but she stayed upright, silver light still flickering weakly through her veins. Dorian looked at her. Really looked at her. No longer observing, no longer testing. Something changed in his expression. Not softness. Not kindness. Recognition. He stepped toward her, boots splashing softly in the mud. When he stopped in front of her, the storm seemed to quiet around them, the rain easing into a gentler rhythm as though unwilling to interrupt. "Elena Harper," he murmured, voice low enough to shiver through her bones. "You hid this power your entire life. Yet tonight you faced death rather than let it consume you." She swallowed hard, chest aching. He reached out a hand, slowly, giving her time to retreat. His fingers hovered just inches from her cheek, close enough that she felt the warmth radiating off his skin. "Tao, I know," he whispered, "that you're exactly who I've been waiting for." Her breath hitched. Not because of the words, but because the moment his fingertips brushed her jaw, the silver glow in her blood surged again, racing toward the point of contact like it recognized him. Dorian inhaled sharply. A flicker of surprise. Maybe something far more dangerous. Their skin met fully, and the world felt it. A pulse, silent, powerful, rippled outward, shaking the branches, stirring the fog, making even the wolves whine and bow their heads. Elena gasped, overwhelmed by the heat and electricity lacing through the touch. She tried to pull away. Too intense, too much, too unfamiliar. But Dorian gently caught her wrist before she could escape. Not forceful. Not possessive. Just certain. Don't run from this, he murmured. Her voice trembled. I don't know what this is. His thumb brushed her cheek, slow and deliberate. It's the beginning, he said softly. And chaos always comes first. The silver glow slowly faded from Elena's veins, dimming into faint threads beneath her skin, like embers cooling after a violent burst of flame. Her breath shuddered in and out, each inhalation scraping against a familiar ache she wished she could forget. Dorian's hand was still on her wrist. Warm, steady, uninvited yet strangely grounding. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Not until the memories pushed in, sharp and unmerciful, uncoiling inside her mind. A flicker of lightning cracked across the sky. And with that flash the past surged forward. Elena had first seen the silver flame when she was 6. A small spark. A harmless glow. She remembered standing beside the riverbank, dipping her fingers into the cold water, watching tiny lights shimmer beneath her skin. Fascinated, innocent, unaware that this soft glimmer would one day terrify everyone she loved. But the elders noticed. They always noticed. She remembered the first time an elder grabbed her wrist too tightly, yanking her toward the council hall as if she were carrying plague rather than magic. Keep your hands hidden, the elder snarled. Don't let anyone see. She didn't understand then. She didn't understand the fear behind his eyes. The wolves in her pack whispered whenever she walked by. Dangerous. Unstable. Cursed. But it wasn't until her 8th year that everything truly changed. That was the night the flame woke. The night the pack turned its back on her. The night her life split into before and after. Rain drummed harder now, pulling her back to the present only to push her deeper into the storm of memory. Dorian hadn't moved. He watched her with unsettling stillness, like he could sense the memories clawing at her ribs. Like he already knew pieces she'd never told a soul. Elena, he said quietly, you're remembering. She swallowed, tasting blood and rain. I always remember. Even when I don't want to. The forest blurred again. It was late, midwinter, dead silence in the pack house. Elena had been sleeping in her small cot beneath the stairs when the nightmares came. Flames. Wolves screaming. A bright silver light swallowing everything. She woke shaking, choking on sobs. The flame responded. Her hands erupted in blinding silver heat, the glow spilling down the hall like spilled moonlight. Panic shot through her. She tried to hide her hands beneath her blanket, but the light seeped through the fabric, bright enough to make shadows dance across the walls. Someone screamed. Then another. Then footsteps thundered toward her. She remembered being dragged out by her arm, the pack crowding around her like she was a monster, not a child. She's a threat. She brings fire where wolves should walk in moonlight. She will destroy us all. Her mother had tried to wrap her arms around her shaking body, but the elders pulled her away. Elena remembered reaching out, crying, begging, but her mother's eyes were already filled with fear. Not for Elena. Of Elena. That memory never left her. That kind of fear had carved itself into her bones. A low sound escaped her now, somewhere between a breath and a broken confession. Dorian's gaze sharpened. What did they do to you? Nothing, she lied softly. But lies were useless here. The forest seemed to recoil. The storm flickered in disapproval. And Dorian stepped closer, close enough that she felt the heat of him through the cold rain. Elena, he murmured, don't lie about wounds that still bleed. She lowered her gaze. You don't understand. I understand exile, he said. I understand power feared by those too weak to name it. I understand being watched as though you might break, when in truth they were terrified you might rise. His words hit something deep inside her, something fragile, something scarred. But she pushed back, voice trembling. No. You don't understand this. A beat of silence. Then, show me, he said quietly. He stiffened. Show you. What they did. What you've been carrying. What makes you flinch when your power answers you. I didn't flinch, she whispered. You did, he said. Your entire body recoils from your own strength. His tone stayed soft, but the truth in it stung. That doesn't come from fear of magic. It comes from fear of memory. Elena closed her eyes. The shadows of her past rose like ghosts waiting to be acknowledged. I was just a child, she whispered. And they treated me like a threat. The storm quieted, not disappearing but listening. Dorian lowered his head slightly, expression unreadable, voice low. Tell me. Elena's breath hitched. They said I didn't belong, she whispered. That something inside me wasn't wolf enough. That I was wrong, broken, dangerous. They didn't even want to train me. They kept me away from the other pups. Away from the moon rituals. Away from anyone who might care. The words stuck in her throat. He felt the moment it hit Dorian. His jaw tightened. His eyes glinted with something violent and cold, anger but not at her. And my friends, she continued, voice cracking. When the flame came back, when it got stronger, they stopped sitting next to me. They didn't want to touch me. They didn't want to be seen with me. They acted like my shadow would burn them. Her breath shook. They were children, she said, forcing a brittle smile. They didn't know any better. Dorian stepped closer. Elena, he murmured, you're still trying to excuse pain that wasn't your fault. She looked away, throat tight. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. Her head snapped up. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected anything from him except dominance and threat and cold curiosity. But the way he said it, bow steady, unyielding, as if her past was a wound on his own skin. It shook something loose inside her. Pack feared me, she whispered. And I spent every day trying to be smaller, quieter, less. Her fingers curled into trembling fists. Because if I stood out, if the flame came back even for a moment, they said the next accident would kill someone. Dorian's breath grew heavier. Not lust, not admiration. Rage. A quiet, tightly controlled rage. They made you afraid of yourself, he said. She nodded. And alone, he added. Her voice broke. Yes. He took one more step, just one. But it closed some invisible distance she never realized was suffocating her. Elena, he said quietly, you have walked your entire life as if apologizing for breathing. But your flame, your power, your very existence, none of it was meant to be small. The rain softened around them, misting rather than pounding. She swallowed, voice frayed. Then why does it hurt so much? Why do I feel like everyone was right? Like something is wrong with me? Dorian's answer was immediate, unshaken. Because no one ever stayed long enough to show you what you are. Her breath caught. Tight. Painful. He moved even closer, his aura brushing against her skin like heat from a fire she had forgotten how to stand near. And I will, he said. Her pulse stuttered. Something deep inside her, something wounded, something lonely, leaned toward that promise before her mind could protest. But fear struck again, sharp and instinctive. You watch me, she whispered. Like you're waiting for something. Like you're hunting something. His gaze didn't waver. Not hunting, he said softly. Recognizing. Recognizing what? He lifted her chin gently with two fingers, forcing her eyes to his. The wolf the world tried and failed to bury. Her breath broke. And for the first time in her life, the memory of what she had been was not a weight dragging her down, but something rising. Something awakening. Something the storm itself seemed to brace for. The forest quieted in a way that felt unnatural. Too sudden, too complete. Almost as if the night itself sensed what Elena was about to walk into. As if the air was holding its breath for her. Dorian didn't speak again, but he simply turned toward the deeper stretch of the woods. The part where the trees grew older, thicker, twisted by centuries of moonlight and secrets. His steps slowed, not from hesitation but from reverence, as though he knew the weight of where he was taking her, and the weight of what she was about to discover. Elena followed, her heartbeat uneven, every sense on edge. The storm had softened to a faint drizzle, but mist curled low around the ground, clinging to her ankles with an almost mindful touch. She felt watched, but not by predators this time. By something older. By something that felt like memory. As they walked, the trees gradually shifted in appearance. Not in shape but in presence. Their bark glowed faintly, lines of silver tracing through their trunks like veins lit from within. The moss beneath their boots shimmered with a faint blue dust, each step stirring motes of ancient light into the air. She had never seen this place before, yet something deep within her stirred with a strange, heavy familiarity. Dorian sensed it. Of course he did. His voice dropped to a low murmur threaded with meaning. Your pulse changed. She didn't deny it. This place feels wrong. No, he corrected softly. Not wrong. No. The word hit something inside her chest, a chord that trembled, fragile and instinctive. Known, she echoed. To you, he said. Even if you've never stepped here, your blood remembers. Her throat tightened. Memories she didn't possess flickered in her mind. Shadows, flames, figures moving beneath a crescent moon. She pushed them away, but they clung to the edges of her thoughts. Where are you taking me? She whispered. Somewhere only the marked can enter, he answered. Somewhere that answers to bloodlines, not footsteps. Elena's breath stilled. Marked, she repeated. You think I'm... No, Dorian looked back at her, eyes burning gold in the dim. I don't think. I know. Before she could respond, the forest widened into an open grove, and the sight before her pulled the breath from her lungs. The Moonshadow Grove. She'd only heard fragments about it, half-whispered tales in childhood, stories told in fear rather than wonder. A place the elders spoke of as if it were myth. A place where wolves did not enter lightly. A place where magic was older than the packs themselves. Yet here it was, alive, breathing. The grove was circular, the trees forming towering pillars around it, their branches woven tightly overhead to form a vast dome of interlocking silver leaves. The ground was a mosaic of natural stone, but the stones were engraved with runes that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. A soft glow radiated from them, pale blue shifting to lavender then fading back again. At the center stood a massive stone arch, draped in vines that shimmered with silver dew. Symbols carved into its surface flickered to life as she approached, as if awakening in recognition. Elena stopped moving. Her body refused another step. The grove wasn't just beautiful. It vibrated with a kind of awareness that made her skin prickle. It reminded her of standing before a fire that knew her name. Dorian watched her carefully, but he didn't push her forward. Elena, he said, voice low and resonant, this place is sacred to the first wolves. It only reveals itself when prophecy stirs. A chill spiraled down her spine, not from cold, but from the eerie certainty that something here truly was awakening. Prophecy. The word itself felt heavy, dangerous. I'm not part of any prophecy, she whispered. He stepped beside her, close enough that she felt the heat of his presence. Your power says otherwise. She shook her head. I'm no legend. I'm a mistake. The symbols on the stones shifted sharply, glowing brighter for a second, pulsing like a warning. Dorian's expression darkened. They disagree. She looked down. The runes beneath her feet illuminated. Not beneath Dorian, not anywhere else, but only beneath her. A circle of silver light formed around her boots, rising like smoke in thin tendrils before evaporating into the air. Her heart hammered. No, she murmured. No, this is wrong. It shouldn't react to me. It was always going to react to you, he said quietly. You were born under the marked moon. She froze. No one had ever spoken that phrase to her directly. The elders whispered it behind closed doors. The pack treated it like a curse. She'd only ever caught fragments, just enough to know it was connected to her exile. How do you know that? She whispered. Dorian looked at her with an intensity that bordered on reverence. Because I saw the omen the night you were born. She blinked hard, breath stuttering. You weren't even in my pack. No, he said. But every alpha feels the shift of a new prophecy. And the night you took your first breath, the moon turned silver. Not white. Not gold. Silver, like the flame in your veins. Her pulse roared in her ears. My parents never told me that. They wouldn't, he said. Because they feared what it meant. Her voice cracked. What does it mean? He stepped closer. His voice dropped to a low, reverent whisper. That the child of the flame walks again. Elena stared at him, disbelief twisting through her chest. That's just a tale, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. A myth told to pups. A bedtime story. His gaze didn't flicker. No. It's a bloodline. And you carry it. Her throat felt tight. Even if that were true, why does this place react to me? Because the grove was created by your ancestors. The ground trembled softly as he spoke, the stones humming, the runes brightening in waves that rippled outward from where she stood. Her knees weakened. She felt as though the whole grove was watching her, waiting for a recognition she had never asked for. Dorian. Her voice was barely audible. I'm not meant for this. I can't even control my power. I can't shift without hurting myself or someone else. I spent my whole life just trying not to be seen. And yet, he murmured, brushing a hand lightly to her shoulder, not claiming, not forcing but grounding, this place sees you. The runes pulsed again, brighter. The vines over the stone arch shifted, curling back as though bowing to her, revealing deeper carvings beneath the surface. Ancient wolves, their forms intertwined with flame and moonlight. And among them, a figure. A woman. Hands ablaze with silver fire. Eyes glowing with the same haunting light Elena had always feared in herself. Written beneath her image in a language older than any pack tongue, was a single line. She who bears the silver mark commands the dawn of the new cycle. Elena's breath faltered. What does it mean? She whispered. Dorian's voice was soft, almost mournful. It means the world has been waiting for you longer than you've been alive. A tremor ripped through her. No, she murmured, backing away. But the runes beneath her followed, lighting with every step. Elena, Dorian said, reaching for her arm before she could retreat further. Listen to me. This place does not make mistakes. Prophecy does not choose lightly. And destiny does not rise for the weak. Her voice broke. But why me? Why choose someone who was cast out? Someone who couldn't even stay with her own pack? Someone who... He stepped in front of her, voice sharper now, cutting through the rising panic. Because strength is not measured by the pack that failed you. She froze. Strength, he continued, is measured by the fire you carry despite them. The grove glowed brighter around them. The mist rose in thin ribbons, swirling as though answering his words. The ancient symbols lit with increasing brilliance, responding to Elena's quickening pulse, to her fear, to her rising power. Power she had always tried to hide. Power the world refused to ignore. Look, Dorian said, lifting her hand gently. She stared at her palm. The faint silver glow she'd spent her life suppressing flickered to life, brighter, steadier, pulsing in time with the glowing runes of the grove. The air shifted. The temperature rose. And whisper-thin voices brushed against her ears, even though there was no one else in the grove. She flinched, eyes wide. What was that? Dorian didn't look surprised. The ancestors. A cold shiver raced down her spine. They're speaking. They're remembering you, he said. Her skin prickled. The whispers grew clearer, not words but echoes. Shapes. Impressions. She saw flashes of battlefields drenched in moonlight. Wolves of impossible size charging into darkness. A woman of flame standing atop a cliff, her eyes blazing silver as countless wolves bowed beneath her. The vision cut out abruptly. Elena gasped. Dorian steadied her. What did you see? She shook her head, voice trembling. I don't understand it. I saw wolves, hundreds of them, bowing. And flames. And a woman, someone who looked like me. That's because she was you, Dorian said. Her heart lurched painfully. That's impossible. Elena, he whispered, eyes locked onto hers, you are the bearer of the silver mark. The blood you carry has walked this world before. Her breath caught. Reincarnation, she whispered. No, he said slowly. Legacy. Her knees threatened to give way. The grove hummed louder. The arch pulsed with light. And a warm, ancient wind swept through the clearing, lifting Elena's hair, brushing her cheeks, enveloping her as though greeting a long-lost daughter. Elena swallowed hard. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Dorian's voice softened, rich with something that felt like certainty. You don't have to be ready, he said. Destiny doesn't wait for readiness. It waits for recognition. He reached out, slow and unthreatening, letting a strand of her hair slide through his fingers. And the grove, he murmured, has recognized you. The words settled around Elena like a spell. Her knees went weak and she had to steady herself on the nearest stone, feeling the warmth of its silver-blue glow seep into her fingers. The grove pulsed in response to her heartbeat, echoing her hesitation, her fear, her trembling awe. It was alive, Not just trees and stones but memory, power, expectation. She lifted her gaze and for the first time, truly saw the full expanse of the Moonshadow Grove. The arching trees, the runes crawling along every surface, the mist curling in the corners. It all felt aware of her presence. The light under her skin, her hidden silver flame, brightened slightly as if acknowledging recognition. A soft hum rose from the ground beneath her boots, a sound that was not wind, not stone, not water but something old, something eternal. Dorian's eyes never left her. There was a weight there, a mixture of warning and reverence that made her pulse quicken. His hand hovered near hers, not touching but bridging the invisible gap between the mortal and the destined. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice low, almost reverent. Elena nodded slowly, unable to speak. The grove whispered in a language older than her, older than any pack, older than the moon. She could feel the echoes of the silver mark vibrating through her veins, tugging at her mind, at her soul. Memories that weren't hers but somehow had been. The rise and fall of ancient packs, battles fought with claws and fire, leaders crowned and betrayed, flashed behind her eyes. A sharp breeze moved through the grove, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and wildflowers, the mingling of battlefields and springtime meadows. Her silver flame surged faintly along her wrists, just enough to illuminate the runes that swirled beneath her fingers like living ink. She pressed her palm against the stone at her side, and the carvings flared in response, as if recognizing the lineage that had walked these grounds before her. Dorian stepped closer, his shadow falling over her hands, grounding her even as the power around them soared. "This," he whispered, voice trembling ever so slightly, "was always meant for you. Every choice your ancestors made led to this moment." Elena swallowed, the weight of those words pressing against her chest. "But I'm not ready. I'm not like them. I can barely control this." She gestured at the faint glow crawling up her arm, trembling like a wild pulse she had tried to bury her whole life. He crouched slightly, lowering his voice, but his eyes burned into hers with a strange intensity. "You don't need to be like them. You only need to be yourself. The power chooses its bearer, but the path you walk is yours alone." She wanted to run. She wanted to curl up and hide in some dark, empty corner far from the weight of destiny, from the expectations of the grove, from the fire that was hers and yet not hers. And yet her feet refused to move. Something deeper than fear held her, something that had whispered in her dreams in the quietest moments of exile, "You were always meant for more." The mist thickened, curling around her like fingers, and in its folds, shapes moved. Wolves, tall, luminous, their eyes glinting silver, appeared at the edge of the grove. They were guardians, watchers, echoes of the past and the future, bowing their heads as she trembled beneath the weight of recognition. Each one bore the faint imprint of her mark, flickering along their foreheads like twin flames. The silver mark. Her silver mark. Elena's chest tightened. She started, but the words caught in her throat. Her hands shook. The visions, fragments of battles, of fire, of wolves bowing, clawed at the edges of her mind. Every story she'd ever been told about curses, mistakes, exile, they felt distant now, like shadows fleeing from the brilliance of what she was. Dorian's hand finally brushed hers, not pressing, not claiming, just grounding her, reminding her she was still herself in this ancient, humming, living place. "It doesn't have to frighten you," he said, voice low but commanding. "It's part of you. Part of what you are. And part of what you will become." Elena swallowed hard, the weight of centuries pressing on her shoulders. The grove pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The mist twined tighter around them, and the glowing runes stretched toward her like fingers of light, beckoning her into the destiny that had always been waiting. Her pulse matched the rhythm, her breath caught in her throat, and a single thought rose above all the fear. "I can't run from this anymore." The grove had barely settled after recognizing her when the first ripple of disturbance rolled through the trees. It was subtle at first, a low growl carried on the wind, a shadow slipping across the runes. Then another. And another. Elena's pulse skipped. She spun, searching the mists, the glowing stones, the whispering trees. The energy that had felt alive, protective, now quivered with tension. Something or someone had entered their sanctuary uninvited. From the ridge beyond the grove, a figure emerged, and with him the darkness came alive. Kalen Vex, the rival alpha whose name had been whispered in fear for decades, stepped into the pale moonlight. His armor-like pelt shimmered black as oil, and his eyes glinted red in the shadows, predatory and calculating. Behind him, shapes slithered through the fog, unnerving and unnatural. Shadow beasts, sinewy and silent, their forms flickering between smoke and wolf. Elena froze, the silver flame in her veins flaring instinctively, reacting to the threat. Her stomach churned, terror clawing up her throat, but also something deeper. Anger, a rush of survival that tingled through every nerve. She had been hidden, unnoticed, safe within this grove, until now. Dorian moved first. Not a step of hesitation, not a moment of doubt. He positioned himself in front of her, his massive frame radiating authority, and his amber eyes blazed like molten fire. "Stay behind me," he commanded, voice low, resonant, but there was something unspoken beneath it. Trust, challenge, and a quiet warning. Elena wanted to argue, to run, to hide in the shadows of the glowing runes, but her instincts, sharpened by exile and fear, refused. Her hands shook, but a flicker of silver flames sparked along her wrists, responding to her will. "I won't be powerless. Not again." Kaelin's laugh echoed through the grove, dark and cruel. "Dorian," he called, voice dripping venom, "you protect her and you defy the council. Do you think the world will wait for your indecision?" The shadow beasts surged forward, moving like smoke but striking like claws. Elena instinctively flinched, but Dorian moved with terrifying grace, intercepting the attack. Silver flame and shadow collided with a deafening hiss. Sparks of light and darkness streaked across the grove, illuminating every terrified, awestruck face, every rune, every stone, as if the forest itself was caught between the two forces. Elena ducked behind a glowing column, her chest heaving, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She could feel the grove's energy pulsing with hers, trembling at the violence, at the disruption of centuries of stillness. Her own flame responded, flickering with her heartbeat, wild and unpredictable. She tried to shape it, but fear and adrenaline warped it, shooting a burst of silver into the nearest shadow beast. It shrieked, dissipating into smoke with a hiss that rattled her bones. Dorian's movements were poetry and war combined. He didn't just fight, he challenged them, every swing of his claws, every shift of his massive frame, commanding the grove itself to lean in his favor. But Kaelin was relentless, and the beasts came in waves, unending, pushing both of them closer to the edge of the sacred circle. Then came the voices, the council. The Alpha Council, hidden among the mist and shadows, now watching in judgment. Their whispers carried like cold knives across the grove. "You've allowed this creature to enter sacred ground. Her presence taints the prophecy. She is dangerous. Remove her before she destroys everything." Elena's heart clenched. They weren't worried about Kaelin or the shadow beasts. They were worried about her. Always her. Always the girl who was too powerful, too dangerous, too unpredictable. Dorian's jaw tightened as he heard the whispers, amber eyes flashing with fury. But the council's disapproval carried weight. He was warned, either protect Elena or protect his pack, his people, his legacy. Not both. Elena's hands flared, silver sparks leaping to life as she clenched her fists. She wanted to run forward, wanted to fight beside him, wanted to prove herself. But the council's words burned into her mind, doubt threading through her resolve. A shadow beast lunged at her, teeth glinting with malice, and she dodged instinctively. Her flame erupted, pushing it back in a blinding wave. Dorian's roar followed hers, a challenge and a vow wrapped together, striking Kaelin and his darkness like a thunderbolt. But the council's murmurs continued, cold and unyielding. "Leave," one voice demanded. "She is a threat. She will destroy us." The words tore through Elena, striking a raw nerve. Exile, rejection, fear. All those nights of hiding, all those years of running, they converged in a single pulse of heat along her spine. Her chest ached with a bitter truth. Even here, even now, she could not belong. Dorian's hand brushed hers, not in command, not in restraint, but in connection. His amber eyes held hers, steady, unwavering. "Elena," he said, voice low but fierce, "you do not have to accept them. You only have to survive." The grove quivered with anticipation, the runes flaring wildly as the shadow beasts recoiled from the surge of her silver flame. But the council's edict could not be ignored. Whispers became shouts, shouts became commands. "Leave. Now." Elena's chest tightened, a storm inside her echoing the thunder beyond the trees. Her gaze flicked to Dorian, who was already wading into the next wave of shadow beasts, fighting with a ferocity that both terrified and inspired her. She wanted to stay. She wanted to fight. She wanted to stand beside him and prove that she could be more than exile, more than fear, more than prophecy. But the council's command was absolute. And for the first time, Elena realized something even more terrifying than the shadow beasts. They had chosen her to run. Her legs moved before her mind could catch up. She bolted, leaving the sacred circle behind, leaving Dorian behind, leaving the fighting, leaving the fire of destiny and the weight of expectation pressing down on her back. The forest swallowed her scream, rain stinging her cheeks, lightning carving the sky into jagged white knives. Her heart pounded in her ears. Her silver flame pulsed along her veins, wild and untamed, echoing the chaos she fled. And as the sounds of battle receded behind her, Elena whispered to the night, to the storm, to herself, "I will not run forever." The words were both a vow and a promise, and somewhere deep in the shadows, Dorian's gaze followed her flight, amber eyes heavy with longing and fury, knowing that their paths would cross again, and that when they did, nothing would be the same. Elena stumbled through the forest, each step heavy with exhaustion, fear, and the lingering pulse of her silver flame. The rain had ceased, leaving the night thick with mist, the air sharp and wet with the scent of earth and pine. Her chest heaved, every inhale a mixture of desperation and defiance. Somewhere deep in her bones she knew she could not run forever, but tonight she needed refuge. The cave appeared as if the forest itself had guided her, a hollowed alcove etched into the rock, sheltered by ferns and twisting vines. Candlelight flickered from a small fire already burning inside, casting golden shadows across damp stone walls. She stepped cautiously inside, instinctively checking the shadows, the corners, the way the light moved. And then she froze. Dorian was there. Silently, impossibly, leaning near the fire. His eyes, amber and molten in the dim light, caught hers immediately. Not with judgment, not with anger, but with a raw, careful concern that made her stomach tighten. He had tracked her. Always had. Always would. "Elena," he murmured, his voice low, soft, almost a caress. "You should not have run so far." She swallowed, forcing her voice steady, though it trembled under the weight of exhaustion and fear. "I had no choice," she whispered. "You don't understand. The council, the shadow beasts, everything." He moved closer, slow, deliberate, his presence filling the cave without touching her yet. The firelight caught the sharp planes of his face, the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes never left hers. "I understand more than you think," he said. "But not everything. And that is why I am here." For a moment the cave was silent but for the soft crackle of the fire. Her pulse pounded in her ears, mingling with the faint echo of silver flame coursing through her veins. She felt exposed, not just physically but in every way that mattered. Every secret, every scar, every fear. Dorian crouched then, close enough that the heat from his body brushed her arm. He lifted a cloth soaked in water and gently pressed it to the cut on her forearm. Elena flinched, her flame reacting, flickering in small bursts as if protesting both the touch and the tenderness. "You've been hiding more than your power," he said quietly, fingers brushing her skin just enough to steady her. "I can see it. All of it. The fear, the exile, the nights you thought no one would come for you." Elena's breath hitched. She tried to look away but couldn't. His eyes anchored her, deeper than any gaze she had ever known. The amber burned not with anger or command but with recognition. Recognition of her pain, her loneliness, her fire. "I wasn't always afraid," she whispered, voice breaking. "I thought I could control it, the flame, myself. But my pack, they cast me out. Said I was too dangerous, too unpredictable. I've been running ever since." Dorian's hand lingered near hers, steady and unwavering. "And yet here you are," he said softly. "Still standing. Still breathing. Still surviving." She swallowed, trembling. "I don't even know if I can trust anyone anymore. Not with this. Not with what I am." A tense beat passed, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words, heavy with possibility. Dorian finally leaned closer, the warmth of his breath brushing her cheek. "You can trust me," he said, voice low, rough around the edges. I see you. All of you, and I will not let the world take you from me. Elena's eyes widened. Her chest ached with disbelief, hope, and fear tangled together like thorned vines around her heart. She wanted to believe him, but belief had always been dangerous. Hope had always burned too bright and left scars in its wake. Their eyes locked. Heartbeats mingled. Breath shallow. And the firelight danced across their faces, illuminating the raw intimacy that had begun to grow between them in stolen moments, in fleeting touches, in unspoken understanding. Her silver flame flickered again, a pulse resonating with his presence as though acknowledging him, accepting him as part of her world. She could feel it thrumming against her wrist, climbing her arm, and for the first time not in fear, not in shame, but with a strange thrill of possibility. "Dorian," she breathed, a whisper fragile, laden with uncertainty. How can I trust you with everything I am? Not just the flame, but me." He smiled faintly, a soft curve that carried both promise and gravity. "Because I've seen the darkness in the world, Elena. I've seen what it does to those who try to hide, who try to run, who try to deny themselves. And I've also seen what happens when someone refuses to be broken. You are not meant to hide. And I am not meant to leave you alone." The words sank into her, weaving into the spaces of fear she had tried to seal shut. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to surrender to the warmth, the closeness, the undeniable pull between them. Her breath caught as he leaned slightly closer, their faces mere inches apart, the firelight reflecting in both of their eyes. The almost kiss hovered in the air, a delicate, dangerous precipice between hesitation and surrender. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to run, to hide from vulnerability. Every heartbeat screamed at her to lean in, to trust, to finally accept that someone had seen her, and refused to let her go. But then doubt crept back in like a cold shadow in the corners of the cave. Can I trust him? She thought. Can I risk everything on someone who might not survive the world with me? Dorian's hand brushed her temple gently, as if reading her hesitation. Trust me, he whispered, voice almost a caress, or leave. But know this, I will not let the world take you. Not tonight. Not ever. Elena's pulse raced, the silver flame along her veins flaring softly, matching the rhythm of the fire. Her chest tightened. Somewhere in that tension, in that fragile, dangerous closeness, she felt the first fragile bloom of connection. The first sense that perhaps she could belong even in the chaos, even with the prophecy, even with Dorian. And as the moonlight filtered through the cave entrance, silver and cold, brushing over their entwined shadows, Elena realized something both terrifying and exhilarating. She was no longer alone. Not in the grove, not in the prophecy, not in the fire. Dorian was there, steadfast, watching, protecting. Not just her body, not just her life, but her very essence. The part of her that had been exiled, abandoned, feared. And for the first time she allowed herself a trembling, dangerous hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. The cave pulsed with warmth and firelight, with silver flame and amber eyes, with the quiet promise of something neither of them had dared to name, but both had felt in the brief electric closeness of their almost touch. And somewhere in the dark corners of the world outside, the shadows shifted and waited, unaware that in this cave, in this fragile, trembling moment, something had changed forever. The chamber was massive, carved from stone older than any living wolf, illuminated by torches that flickered and cast long, accusatory shadows against the walls. Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding, silver flame coiling faintly around her wrists. Every step echoed against the cold floors, but the sound was drowned by the sudden, sharp voice of Kalen Vex. "Elena Harper," he sneered, his eyes glinting red in the torchlight. "Or should I call you, the destroyer the prophecy warned us about?" The words struck her like a physical blow. Her stomach lurched. The whispers from the Alpha Council rose immediately, snaking through the chamber like a cold wind, curling around her, suffocating. "She is too dangerous," hissed one elder. "She carries a power none can control. Exile should have been enough. Why bring this threat here?" Her chest tightened. Her flame flared in response, faint at first, quivering with rage, with fear, with disbelief. She tried to steady herself to speak, but the words lodged in her throat. "Why now?" He thought, after everything, why now do they decide I am the threat? Dorian stepped in, his massive frame blocking her as best he could, amber eyes blazing. "Enough," he growled. His voice carried through the chamber like thunder. She is under my protection. She will not be judged by those who fear what they cannot understand. The council murmured, scandalized, voices rising in sharp, accusing tones. Dorian's jaw tightened. The tension in his shoulders screamed of the war he was waging, not against Kaelin or the shadow beasts, but against centuries of expectation and duty that bound him tighter than any chain. Elena's eyes flitted between the council and Dorian. The betrayal of Kaelin's accusation, deliberate, precise, cut through her like knives. She had believed, hoped, maybe even trusted that the prophecy could be her purpose, that her path might have allies. Now it felt like the world itself was turning against her. And then it happened. A spark. A flicker. A whisper of heat rising from her chest. Her silver flame responded to her rage, feeding on the injustice, on the fear, on the humiliation. At first it was subtle, curling along her veins like firelight through glass. But Kaelin noticed. His smirk faltered for the briefest of moments. "Do you feel it?" he said, eyes narrowing. "You cannot hide it anymore." Elena's breath came in short, ragged gasps. She felt the fire swell inside her, threatening to break free, to erupt in a force she had spent her whole life denying. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to show them all she was not a weapon to be feared, but a being to be reckoned with. Dorian's hand found hers, grounding her, steadying the inferno that threatened to spill into chaos. "I will stand with you," he whispered, voice low, fierce. "No counsel, no prophecy, no shadow can take you from me." Her silver flame surged then, responding not just to anger but to his presence, to his unwavering trust, to the intimacy of his vow. It exploded across the chamber like liquid silver, spilling over the torches and walls, making the shadows recoil, making the council gasp, making Kaelin stumble back. The chamber shook with the power of her release. Runes etched into the stone walls ignited in response, flickering as if acknowledging her lineage, her birthright, her wrath. The shadows that had clung to Kaelin's dark magic shrieked and twisted, dissolving under the brilliance of her silver fire. Elena's vision blurred, the air vibrating with energy, the walls rattling, the torches swinging wildly. Her hands flared, her body trembling with the power she had once feared to touch. For the first time she glimpsed the extent of what she could do. Not a spark, not a flicker, but hers. Entirely, completely, terrifyingly hers. Kaelin roared, advancing again, but Dorian shifted, growling low, moving between them. His amber eyes met hers, filled with both pride and a warning she didn't need to hear. Control it or it will control you. The council was silent now, frozen in shock and fear. Their whispers had ceased, replaced by the low hum of power vibrating through stone and bone. Elena's chest heaved. Every heartbeat felt like a drum announcing a war that had only just begun. And yet, even in that moment of unprecedented power, even as the chamber shivered under her silver flames, a cold realization struck her. She could not stay. Not here, not now. The council would not relent, Kaelin would not forgive, and the prophecy, the very thing she had once hoped might guide her, had become a chain tightening with every breath. She glanced at Dorian, whose hand still gripped hers, his amber eyes locking onto hers in a silent promise. But the choice was hers. Fight and risk everything, including him. Run and risk the power within her consuming itself in isolation. Her breath caught. The silver flame flared one final time, illuminating her face, her eyes, her hair like molten metal in the torchlight. Heart raw, limbs trembling, she made a decision. "I will not hide," she whispered to herself, voice steady despite the chaos. "I will not run forever." The chamber trembled as if echoing her vow. Shadows twisted, torches flickered, and Kaelin hissed in fury. Dorian growled low, shifting slightly, ready to follow her into whatever hell awaited. Elena's eyes blazed, silver fire licking along her skin, hands raised, trembling with a promise. She would fight, she would survive, and she would claim the destiny they all feared. And then she bolted. The silver flame left trails in her wake, smoke and light weaving into the chamber like a living thing. Kaelin roared, reaching for her, but the moment was gone. Dorian followed, not just to protect but to stand beside her in whatever war was coming. The council's whispered judgments, Kaelin's fury, the world's fear, all of it was left behind in her wake. But she knew, in the depths of her heart and in the heat of her pulse, that this was only the beginning. The real battle, the real test had yet to come. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the chamber, eyes unseen and dark, the prophecy whispered again. She has awakened. The world will burn or bow. The night had thickened into a heavy darkness, but it trembled at the edges with unnatural light. Elena emerged from the forest shadows, wet hair plastered to her face, breath ragged, chest heaving, not from fear but from fury, determination, and the raw surge of power coursing through her veins. Every nerve in her body pulsed with silver flame, alive and untamed, responsive to her heartbeat, to her resolve, to the fury that had been bottled for so long. Before her the enemy's assault had reached its apex. Shadow beasts surged through the trees, clawing at anything in their path, screaming with the voices of forgotten spirits. Kalen Vex stood at the center, eyes gleaming with malice, commanding the darkness around him like an extension of his will. Dorian fought valiantly in the clearing, massive claws tearing through shadow after shadow, but he was being pushed back, his strength alone not enough to hold the tide. Elena's silver flame leapt higher along her skin, crawling up her arms and illuminating the night. She could feel it answering the fury in her heart, obeying every command, bending to her will. Her breaths came in sharp, measured gasps as she stepped into the clearing, and with each step the ground seemed to hum beneath her. Small tremors shook the earth, unnoticed by the enemy, but not by the wolves who watched in terror and awe from the edges of the battle. She stopped, raised her hands and let the fire explode from her in a brilliant arc. The silver flames rolled across the battlefield, striking the shadow beasts like molten steel. They shrieked, dissipating into nothingness, unable to withstand the purity of her power. Kalen's smirk faltered as he realized the tide of battle had shifted with a single surge of her will. The forest around them responded violently. Trees groaned as roots twisted and surged upward, forming barriers that blocked the advance of the shadow beasts. Stones cracked and shifted, revealing the hidden bones of ancient ruins long forgotten. Runes carved into the rock pulsed in response to Elena's silver flame, igniting with a fierce light that cast Kalen's twisted figure in stark relief. Dorian watched from the edge of the fray, eyes wide with awe. He saw her, not just Elena Harper, the exile, the girl who had fled the council, the girl who had hidden her fire, but the woman, the shifter, the force of nature she had always been destined to become. Amber eyes glinting, he roared her name across the chaos. Elena. My mate. Own it, own your power. Her gaze met his, and in that instant the last chains of doubt and fear shattered. The silver flame leapt higher, coiling like living serpents around her arms, her shoulders, her neck. She could feel the connection now, between her power, her purpose, her mate, and the world she had been cast away from. She inhaled deeply, feeling the energy of the grove, the ancestors, the prophecy, and her own heart swell within her. Kalen stepped forward, defiance etched in every line of his form. You think this changes anything? He spat, shadows writhing around his feet. You are still a threat. You are not the savior. They will destroy you before you can even rise. Elena's eyes blazed. She took a step closer, her flame flaring in response, hot and fierce. No, she said, voice ringing like hammered steel. I am not your sacrifice. I am not your weapon. I am everything I was born to be. The earth trembled beneath her feet as she moved through the battlefield. Shadow beasts recoiled before her, twisting, writhing, dissipating under the weight of her presence. Silver fire erupted from her hands in cascading waves, striking trees and rocks, igniting ancient ruins with light and energy. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer afraid. She was the protector, the force the prophecy had promised, and she would not be subdued. Dorian reached her side, placing a hand on her shoulder, grounding her, connecting their fire. Together, he breathed, amber eyes glowing. Together we will end this. She nodded, flame coursing in tandem with his own strength, their energies mingling, a beacon of unstoppable force. Elena's power roared to life, more vivid than ever, each pulse a declaration. She was alive, she was unstoppable, she was herself. Kalen hissed in fury and desperation, shadows converging to strike at her, but Elena lifted her hands, and the silver flame surged outward like a tidal wave. The shadows shrieked, melting into nothingness as the earth quaked violently. Branches twisted and snapped, roots erupted, and the remnants of ancient ruins awoke, towering stone guardians carved with symbols of old leaning into the battle, empowered by Elena's fury. Her heart raced, but not with fear. Each beat resonated with certainty, with power, with the knowledge that she would protect those who could not protect themselves. Wolves scattered, Kaelin's forces faltered, and Dorian's own strength renewed beside her, emboldened by her fire. She stepped forward, face resolute, silver flame dancing across her skin like living armor. Every whisper of the prophecy now rang true, not as a threat but as her destiny fully claimed. Kaelin glared, hatred flashing across his features. "You will fall," he screamed. Elena met him without flinching, chest rising with controlled fury. "No," she said, voice unwavering. "I will not fall. You will bow or you will burn." The ground trembled again. The wind howled through the ruins. The trees twisted, and every creature in the forest sensed the birth of something monumental. A power that refused to be shackled, a protector fully awake, a mate who would not be denied. Dorian reached for her hand again, fingers entwined with hers, energy sparking between them. "Elena," he whispered, awestruck, "you are everything. The prophecy, it was always yours. Mine to share, mine to fight beside." Her silver flame surged higher, responding to his strength, their connection, the fury of her heart. She was no longer the frightened girl who had fled the council. She was not just a flame, she was the wildfire that would scorch darkness from the earth. Kaelin took a step back, realizing for the first time that the girl he had underestimated was no longer running. She had embraced her destiny. She had claimed her power. And standing before her, Dorian by her side, she was unstoppable. The battlefield trembled, the forest itself seeming to bow before her silver brilliance. And Elena took a deep, steadying breath, every nerve humming with energy, every muscle alive with purpose. This was her moment. Her eyes locked onto Kaelin's, and with a flick of her wrists, silver flames spiraled around him, forcing him to retreat, shadows dissipating in screaming tendrils. The final confrontation loomed, inevitable, but Elena stood unafraid, whole and radiant with the full measure of her power. The night shuddered around her. The prophecy had been fulfilled, not as a weapon, not as a sacrifice, but as a queen of flame and strength, ready to confront the darkness, to claim her destiny, and to protect the mate who had seen her, understood her, and stood unwavering beside her. And as Kaelin Vex hissed, gathering the last remnants of his shadows for the ultimate strike, Elena inhaled, letting the silver flame ignite fully along her veins, illuminating the forest in a brilliant, terrifying, unstoppable light. This was the birth of the protector. The flame that would not be tamed. The power that would not kneel. And the world would remember her name. The battlefield was silent now, though not peaceful. The trees bent as if bowing under the residual heat of silver flame. Smoke curled upward, carrying the faint scent of singed earth and melted shadow. Stones cracked along ancient runes, glowing faintly with Elena's power, marking the land as hers, not in conquest but in survival, in truth, in destiny. Elena stood at the center of it all, chest heaving, silver fire still tracing veins along her arms and shoulders, a living pulse of power that refused to fade. Her hair clung damp and wild around her face, streaked with soot, but her eyes were brighter than any flame, brighter than any prophecy. They were filled with triumph, pain, and a question that no one could answer but her. What now? Around her, the remnants of Kaelin's shadow beasts slithered away into the night, defeated, fractured, unable to comprehend the force that had erased them. Wolves of her pack, those who had hidden, doubted, or watched silently, stared at her in awe, fear, and wonder. Some trembled, others bowed instinctively, acknowledging not just the power she wielded, but the woman she had become. Dorian stepped close, his amber eyes searching hers, reflecting both the brilliance of the silver flame and the tenderness that had grown between them in stolen moments. He reached for her, hand brushing against hers, grounding her in a reality that was no longer fear or exile. "You are everything," he said, voice low and raw. "The prophecy, the flame, they were always yours. And now everyone will know it." Elena's chest ached, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of all she had carried, all she had lost, and the bond that had grown in the storm of betrayal, flight, and fire. She looked around, taking in the trembling forest, the ruined stones, the shadows fleeing before her. And then quietly she spoke, more to herself than anyone else. "Would you have chosen me?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the settling wind. "Or feared me too?" The question hung in the night air like smoke, curling around every leaf, every stone, every shadow. It was not just a question for those who had watched her, who had doubted her, who had tried to judge her by her flame or her prophecy. It was a question for anyone who had ever felt fear and awe in the same heartbeat, anyone who had faced a choice between submission and trust, between fleeing and standing firm. The silver flame along her skin pulsed once, sharply as if in answer, or as if the world itself was holding its breath. She felt the power settle, not leaving, not retreating but lingering, promising that the journey was far from over, that battles remained, that destinies were still being written. Dorian's fingers entwined with hers, grounding her, steadying the storm that raged both in the forest and in her heart. "You do not have to face this alone," he whispered. "Never again. Whatever comes, we face it together." And in that moment the night seemed to exhale. Stars peeked through clouds, distant and cold, yet somehow softer than before, reflecting in the silver flame that danced across Elena's skin. The forest whispered secrets only she could hear, the echoes of ancestors, the pulse of her own heartbeat, the hint of challenges yet to come. Her eyes lifted toward the horizon, toward the darkness beyond the trees, toward the unknown that still awaited. And the narrator's voice, yours, the listener's, lingered in the mind like fire. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? Could you stand beside her in the shadows, in the fire, in the truth of her destiny? The question is yours, lingering, unanswered, heavy with possibility. And just as the embers of her silver flame settle in the night, a voice calls to you, gentle but insistent. If Elena's fire ignited your soul, if her courage stirred something deep within, subscribe to Anne's romance collections. Here we tell tales that burn, tales that reach into the heart and do not let go. Don't miss a single spark of her story, or the next chapters that wait in shadow and fire. The wind shifts again, carrying faint whispers of future battles, of shadows regrouping, of destiny unfinished. The forest trembles, alive with promise and threat alike. And Elena stands there, silver flame glowing, heart open, power claimed, waiting, ready, unbroken. Because this is more than a battle. This is more than a prophecy. This is the birth of a legend. And the question remains for every heart that watches, for every soul that listens. Would you stand with her, or turn away in fear? The forest was quiet now, but the air felt heavy, charged, as if the earth itself remembered the silver flame that had torn through the shadows. Elena and Dorian stepped together into a clearing, the trees parting like silent sentinels, their branches creaking under the weight of unseen eyes. The light behind them dimmed, folding into twilight, leaving long, wavering shadows that seemed to lean closer with curiosity and caution. Elena's flame had subsided slightly, coiling along her veins like a living heartbeat, a reminder that she had survived, had triumphed, but that survival was not the end. Every muscle in her body was tense, every sense heightened, listening to the whispers of the night that the ordinary world could not perceive. Her heart still raced, not from fear, but from a mixture of triumph and anticipation, of what was to come, of what she could not yet name. Dorian's presence was steady beside her, grounding, his amber eyes scanning the shadows that flickered at the edges of the clearing. Even he, alpha king of his pack, sensed the tremor in the ground beneath their feet. It was subtle at first, a low vibration like the pulse of a giant heartbeat, but it grew, an undercurrent that threaded through every tree, every stone, every whispering wind. And then came the voices. Faint, low, almost indistinguishable at first, curling around the trunks and weaving through the underbrush. Whispered tones, layered, ethereal, almost seductive. She is not the only one. Elena stiffened, silver flame sparking faintly along her skin, responding instinctively to the threat, or perhaps to the recognition of power like her own. Dorian shifted, claws scraping lightly against the stone beneath their feet, every muscle coiled, ready to leap into the fray. Elena's voice, steady but tinged with unease, broke the silence. "Who's there?" No answer came, only the whispers multiplying, weaving a chorus that the forest itself seemed to carry. Shadows shifted and flickered unnaturally in the corners of her vision. The ancient runes embedded in the stones beneath their feet pulsed faintly, resonating with the silver flame that still hummed through her veins. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting, and warning. Dorian's hand found hers instinctively, grounding her as a surge of cold wind swept across the clearing. "This isn't over," he murmured, eyes narrowing as he scanned the trees. I felt it. The tremor, the whispers. Something's coming. Elena inhaled, the fire within her adjusting to the tension, coiling tighter, sharper, ready. I thought we were done, she said, voice tight. I thought, after everything, it would be quiet. But even as the words left her lips, the forest shifted again. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, leaves rustled though no wind stirred, and a deep vibration resonated through the clearing, subtle yet undeniable. Something ancient and powerful was awakening, and it was not yet visible, not yet known, but the warning was clear. The true alpha hasn't risen, yet, a voice seemed to whisper from the darkness, carried by the wind, yet layered with power, with weight, with inevitability. The words lingered, heavy and prophetic, sinking into Elena's chest like a cold stone. Her silver flame pulsed, illuminating her resolve, but also the knowledge that this was far from over. She clenched her fists, the heat of her power thrumming through her veins, sensing the challenge that lay ahead. She had survived Kaelin Vex, claimed her destiny and embraced her fire. But the whispers, the tremors, the sense of an unseen force watching, they reminded her that she had only survived the beginning. Dorian's eyes met hers, full of certainty and unspoken promise. Whatever it is, he said softly, voice carrying over the tremor beneath their feet, we face it together. And this time we don't wait for them to strike first. Elena nodded, silver flame tightening around her like a living cloak. Every instinct in her body screamed that this night, this forest, this moment was a threshold, a doorway into battles, challenges and revelations yet unseen. The forest seemed to hum with energy, the shadows vibrating, alive with the knowledge that forces far older, far darker than Kaelin had stirred. And then the wind shifted again. A faint, almost imperceptible glow appeared deep in the tree-line, pulsing like a heartbeat, a signal, a reminder that the story was far from over. Elena took a steadying breath. Her chest rose, her eyes burned, her heart thrummed in synchrony with the earth beneath her. The fire inside her was not just a weapon, not just a spark. It was a beacon. And whatever waited in the shadows, whatever whispered and watched, would soon learn that she was no longer a girl to be feared. She was a force the world would have to reckon with. The narrator's voice lingers, slow, heavy, prophetic. The world has not seen the last of her. The shadows have only begun to stir. The true alpha has not yet risen. And when they do, the night will tremble. Will you be ready to stand with her? Or will you turn and run? A final wind gusted, scattering leaves and carrying the faint scent of silver flame. The forest seemed to exhale, holding its breath, waiting, watching. And there at the edge of the clearing Elena and Dorian stood, silent, resolute, unbroken. The night was still alive, still dangerous, still whispering secrets that only the brave, the strong and the destined could confront. Because this was not the end. This was a beginning. And somewhere in the shadows, eyes unseen and ancient, the world held its collective breath. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot.